Well, in a perfect world, Laura Ackerman would be here because she is the energy expert at the Land Council. But I'm here and her daughter, Jerusha, is here, so that's pretty cool. Laura is actually in Washington, D.C. this week. We do these international fellows through the State Department. And Laura got invited to go out there, one of just 5 people across the country, to go out there and give some presentations. So she's talking to people about that international program. And this year we had a fellow from Bolivia, Johan Jaeger, and he just flew back there with her, and then he's back to Bolivia, and we had those fellows for 4 months. So Laura is really pro at this, and she helped put together this, as did Jerusha, and I'm gonna try to lead us through it. I've been a long time forest and water activist, and more, as we all are, we have to be climate activists, and fossil fuels are a big part of the climate. So we work with a lot of groups in Washington State. Laura's on a steering committee for the Stand Up to Oil campaign, and Power Pass fracking gas, and the Power Pass coal campaign. The Power Pass coal campaign has been around the longest. It was started by the Sierra Club, and it was funded actually by Michael Bloomberg. He threw a lot of money, I think $100 million or something in that campaign. And so that campaign across the country has been very successful. There's been a lot of coal plants that shut down. I don't think they're building any new coal plants in the United States. I'm sure of that. Unfortunately, they're still building them in India and China. And so that gets us to talking about what goes on around our region. So I want to mention some of the groups that are in Idaho that we work with. The Idaho Conservation League, we work with on energy issues, Snake River Dam removal, a lot of forestry issues. I worked a lot with those folks up in the Panhandle Forest Collaborative. The Andre Riverkeeper and the Wild Idaho Rising Tide, Helen Yost, work with her. Particularly Laura works with her. And 350 Sandport as well. So the oil facilities and the coal facilities have been being proposed for years. And what really happened was that the coal facilities were sort of defeated first, and they've all been defeated. And these were more transport coal facilities, because we are burning coal in Washington State, although we do get some of our electricity in Spokane, because Avista has the coal-fired plants in Montana. And just a sidetrack, they are in negotiations to buy out or spend off their part by 2025, so they would no longer have any obligations. It's going to cost us all some money to pay for that, but I think it's probably the right thing to do. We got to get away from coal. So the coal facilities were to transport it primarily for sale in India, but other countries in the East. And the coal they chose to use was Powder River Basin coal. And I get a weekly energy, in our mansion, as an alert. And the price of the coal has been slowly declining over the years. But when you look at the Powder River Basin coal, it's called sub-bituminous. It is such poor quality, it goes for like a quarter of the price of the next level. I mean, this stuff is dirty, it's nasty. They don't burn it in the United States, it is so bad. Instead, we put it on rail cars, and then it goes out to the coast, and then we try to ship it over and sell it to other countries. And then it burns up and creates the carbon dioxide, which does the same impact as if you burned it down the block.
Yeah, because it has a much higher sulfur content than...
Higher sulfur content, and it's less, and so it's less energy efficient because it's got a lot of other non-energy parts to it. It's like mixed in with just regular rock-like stuff. It's very low quality, very low quality. And so we sold it to another country. So the hearings were about people wanting to expand coal facilities, build new ones, because they have this just and they strip mine it down in the Powder River Basin, which is mostly Wyoming, but it goes into Montana some and even a bit into Alberta. So here we are with all this coal that people want to sell, export it, and build new facilities. And the Power Pass coal was highly successful, and part of that reason was hearings. We had hearings in Spokane, lots of hearings in the sites in western Washington, because of course the coal exporting facilities were proposed along the coast, and places like Grace Harbor. And so a lot of that campaign really, to me, was the structure for how we take on other fossil fuels and oil and frack gas, which I'll talk about a bit later. The one in Port of Vancouver was the largest one. It was the only one that actually made it through a lot of the permitting process, and it was finally defeated. And it was defeated by people like you, citizen action, letters, protests. There were some arrests even in Spokane along the railroad. People taking, putting their bodies on the line literally to stop these particular problems. And so the Lands Council got involved for a number of reasons. One, if you're a conservation environmental organization and you're not helping to do something about the climate crisis, then you should question what your organization's about, in my opinion. And so, of course, we're involved in that. The Lands Council, I'll just divert slightly, also gets involved in, besides energy issues, we're on our City Sustainability Action Committee. We work with the Climate Impact Resiliency Consortium to help the Spokane area and the Coeur d'Alene Basin prepare for the changes in climate, which you can look at this climate toolbox, which is actually developed by a woman, Catherine Hegowich, at the U of I. And anyone can look at it. It's called a climate toolbox, and you can go in there and you can see what Moscow is going to look like in 20 or 50 years, depending on the warming scenario. It's quite frightening. We looked at it for Wallace, Idaho, where the Great Burn happened in 1910, and it's the headwaters for all the water that flows into Spokane. You see that there's going to be more extreme weather days, higher temperatures, more days in the 90s, less precipitation in the summer, less snowpack. Overall, it's about the same precipitation, but much less in the summer. So that little diversion, just because it's kind of cool that she actually teaches and works here in Moscow. So here we have connected campaigns, and you talk about process. And so part of the process, Washington State has a State Environmental Protection Act. The United States has the Environmental Protection Act. And so we have the EPA who's overlooking that. Our state Department of Ecology has actually stood up really well to a lot of these facilities. Our governor has spoke out against them because he's a big, do stuff about climate change kind of guy. And so it's been fortunate that we have a fairly progressive blue state, if you will, at the end of the rail line where we can fight these things. Because otherwise, Montana was like, yeah, go for it, build them. Wyoming is suing the state of Washington because we are supposedly hurting their interstate commerce. And we are. We don't want those coal trains, those oil cars coming through Spokane. We don't want them coming through North Idaho either. And I'll talk more about what goes on as they wind their way through North Idaho. So we have the State Environmental Policy Act, which is sort of like the National Environmental Policy Act, and that's the regulatory framework that we got to deal with. And those two acts, they don't say you can or can't do something, they say you must analyze the impacts. You must figure out what is significant and what is maybe not significant. And so a lot of that is reading through really thick documents, environmental impact statements, EISs, and then getting lots of people to comment in and show up to hearings, show up to meetings, and put that kind of pressure on it. It's really a citizen effort. Just to let you know how things go down They come across Montana on Montana Rail, but they're also Burlington Northern Santa Fe tracks. And then some of it is Union Pacific tracks, and it kind of converges in Sandpoint. They go over the rail bridge there in Sandpoint over Lake Pend Oreille, and there's a petition there that I'll talk about in a minute that we want people to sign to not allow building a second bridge, because the only reason they want to build that second bridge is to put more oil and coal into the pipeline, so to speak. So, and then they converge, the Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern, kind of out in the Spokane Valley, converge with each other. They run right through, you've probably all been to Spokane, runs right through Spokane, right through the downtown area on elevated tracks. And I can hear it from my house, which is over a mile away, but you can just imagine if you're, in an apartment or some housing right downtown, it's just rumble, rumble, rumble. And the coal trains are notorious for being a mile or longer, hundreds of cars, and they're slow. And so, in addition to climate change, and I think this is an important thing that I think about, we have safety issues. Now, back in the early 90s, a rail car, it leaves Spokane and then it goes out, kind of crosses over the interstate, and then it splits. And one of the rails goes up, ends up going over Stampede Pass and near Stevens Pass. But they can't take the really heavy cars there. They can take the empties back from there. And so the other one goes down and it cuts through the Palouse and goes down to the Columbia Gorge. And so, what could possibly go wrong? Well, Mosier found out when a car derailed, and Mosier's in Oregon, just upstream from Hood River, a car derailed, caught on fire, and a number of us went down there to look at that afterwards, and it's usually windy in the gorge. Had it been windy that day, there could have been a massive disaster with many deaths, and as it was bad enough. It burned up a lot of stuff and had to shut down the tracks for a week or two. But the disaster, if a train, an oil train, which has volatile gases in it, fell off the track in downtown Spokane, would be unbelievable, as you can just imagine. Or if that happened in Sandpoint. It goes right at the, between the lake and the city of Sandpoint. So sometimes it's easier, particularly in more conservative areas, to really focus on the idea of safety and noise and problems at rail crossings. Oh, we gotta wait. School kids can't get to school. Emergency vehicles can't show up. Sometimes that's a better thing to talk about with firefighters and police than talking about climate change. And so, to me, it's like whatever's gonna work best. But those are really critical issues. They're not fake issues. There's been a dozen or more explosions and fires. Lac Megantic is a classic one up in Canada where it just burned down in half the town and killed numerous people. And that was an oil train that got out of control, flipped over, and apparently the fumes from that fire, or from the oil car, spilled into the sewers and then made their way into people's houses and caught them on fire. I mean, it's just horrible. And over $1 billion worth of damage. So you think about the liability if something hit Sandpoint or Spokane or some of the other cities like Hood River that are really close by. Incredible potential liability.